You'll see in this video how Helix Autosport seem to have done the impossible and given me a stronger clutch with a lighter pedal feel. I did a lot of work on it recently. There's a video, I don't know, a year or two back, but I put the clutch back together with a new clutch in it, but the wrong pressure plate, so it only lasted about 500 miles. Now you'll see why it looks kind of strange, because it is actually up on the ramps that I bought for the rolling road. So I figured before I cannibalise these ramps, let's use them for an intended purpose one more time. So you drive the car up the slope, then you seesaw it forwards, and you can work underneath it. I've used a bit of I-section beam, welded on a post, and welded it onto my jack. So I will cut that off when I'm done, and hopefully I don't need the jack in the meantime. And my friend James has just told me, put a strap around it. So I am now going to attempt to drop the gearbox. Here we go, the thing's perfect for the job. Just use a screwdriver there to lever the box back a little bit, and then drop the jack, and it takes it backwards as it goes down. But you can quickly see it's not going to get low enough to get it off. It's still stuck under the car. So I had to tilt it back and take it off that way. There we go, the 6 bolts are out, the clutch is off. And what I found is the pressure plate has quite a conical nature to it. It's that way, in an inward cone. So it's warped, it's knackered. So I need a new pressure plate. Flywheel, just like the pressure plate, is slightly conical, but this is conical twice as much as the flywheel. So I've checked my old pressure plate, which is the stronger one, clamps the clutch a lot more strongly. And I was going to put this on, but it's got the same conical nature to it. You can see it, look. You can see it there. That's to the tune of 0.3 millimeters, exactly like the one I took off. So I can't put that on. That's no good. I'm going to have the same problem. So I think I'm going to skim the flywheel, which I might have a go at myself in the lathe. I'm going to buy a new pressure plate. I'm going to fit that almost new clutch. That should be good. Nightmare. If this works in the lathe, I'm going to want these dowels out. I'll show you in a second. There's 3 of them that look at the pressure plate. If I'm skimming this, I want to skim these as well to the same amount, so the clutch still clamps the same. So I've got to get those dowels out. So these dowels came out pretty easily really, which was nice. So it's all a little bit on the edge. We've got a surface which isn't going to be terribly happy about being cut, and the way of mounting it, you can see in the centre there, is not brilliant. So I've got a few little things planned to make this work, hopefully to make this work. I'll just tighten that up loosely. There we go. So I can keep it flat by forcing it against the chuck with this and the tailstock. That should keep it flat. And then centrally it's fine on the chuck. It shouldn't be moving this way. It should be nicely aligned on the chuck. But grip wise, it's right in the middle there. It's not a good position for grip. So I've come up with a little nugget here. I'll show you how that goes. If I put that in one of these bolt holes and then spin the chuck, which way is it going to be driving? That way. So spin the flywheel backwards against the chuck there until that locks. Let me show you then inside. That little peg there, you can see it there, look, it's now pushing against the side of that jaw, so that's going to transmit drive nicely when the grip on the internal jaws is not going to be sufficient to be cutting out here at this radius, with the grip only at this tiny radius. So hopefully that is enough to get this thing to work. So the first thing now is to see if I can get it to cut. So I've got dial gauge on there to check it's concentric, really straight. I'm pretty happy with that. It's flicking 0.01 of a millimeter. Is that right? A whole turn is a millimeter. That's 0.1. Yeah, 0.01. So that's absolutely spot on. I'll take that. So the last thing now to see if it'll cut. My God, it's done it. I can't believe that's cut. That's amazing. I'm resurfacing my own flywheel. Right, keep going. So after the initial excitement, you can see it's pulling loads of material off. It appears to be working nicely, but when you stop it, you can see there's some hard patches of chrome which have stayed, and the tool seems to be riding over it. Flex in the machine is just not cutting into those patches of chrome. It's taking forever. I'm having to remove quite a lot of material from elsewhere. So I did this. I held the tool in the right place and just moved the flywheel back and forth, and eventually it did attack its way through, leaving a good surface. So I'm now on the penultimate. I do surface it once again, but all the chrome's gone now. We're down to flat steel, which is great. Now I'm just flattening off the mounting faces where the pressure plate mounts, because I want the gap for the clutch to sit to be the same as it was, so it's still clamped the same amount. Then I can put the dowel pins back in. What a mess. Got to clean this lot up now. But what an amazing machine! There we go, folks. I can't really believe that Boxford 280T has done this, but it's made this thing perfectly flat. I'm chuffed to bits with it. I've taken these tops down as well. It is now a steel surface, not chrome, but meh. Most flywheels are steel, that's fine, or cast iron or something. So that is ready to go back on. I'm chuffed to bits with it. It's 5.3 kilos, this little beastie. Such a cool part. I don't suppose I'll be able to get one now. And I've just been looking at this, and it has a slight conical nature to it, so I might have to buy one of these as well. So I need a new Omega pressure plate and a new Vauxhall Vivaro diesel, or whatever the hell it is, clutch plate. So it's going to get expensive. Right, folks, I'm going to show you what I've got from Helix Autosport. So first of all, this is my flywheel that I sent to them. Rob, I think, from Helix Autosport wanted it to check it, because if it was not in balance and I felt a problem through the clutch pedal, it would be me, you know, calling him, whereas actually it might have been my problem. So all fairness to him, he checked it. It would have been 40 quid to balance it, but it was in spec. Nothing new there. Next we have the pressure plate. Now this is the original pressure plate that came off the Vauxhall Omega where I took the engine from. It was quite a strong pressure plate anyway for the V6 engine, but what he has done is it was warped, so he's put a new plate on here. He's dismantled this component, that's new, and he's changed the springs too, so there are stronger springs in here now. The clamping force onto the clutch will be stronger than the original Omega, that is. So we're already uprated, and the original Omega pressure plate, which this was, I think was up to the job anyway, so we should be pretty sweet now. So that's the pressure plate. And then the pièce de la résistance. This is the new clutch. Let's get it open, shall we? There's the gearbox side. Helix Autosport. It's got some good, 6 good strong springs in it. And it is a, what do they call it? An organic compound. It's nice and chunky. Ooh, it doesn't have springs in it. Normally there's a spring. Hang on, I'll show you. So this is a normal OEM clutch. And here you can see there, look, there's a few layers of bent steel. The steel is ever so slightly bent, and there's a little gap. Can you see it? So once it's clamped, it goes flat, but when the clutch releases, it just springs apart a little bit, and that helps to bring the pressure plate off the clutch, and it doesn't drag, you know. Now I've noticed this new one does not have that feature, so that's interesting. Well, hopefully this solves my problem. So this is, I forget, but more than 10% anyway, I think, stickier than the original material. And that is something like 25% more clamping load. And he said, by the way they changed the spring arrangement, it shouldn't feel too much more at the pedal. But I will be the judge of that when I get the thing together. I think they've increased the spring strength, but moved the pivot point as well. So that's given your foot more leverage on those fingers in the clutch that bend inwards. But the clutch clamping force has increased. So that, I believe, is why they've removed the springs between the clutch plates, which spring the clutch away from the flywheel when you release it, because you're going to have less travel at the clutch. I think that's the compromise. But it's so cool to know that there was all that extra performance in there with really nothing more than OEM sort of stuff, just arranged in a different way. Up you go. Up you go, mate. Get on there, you little monkey. You cheeky monkey. So you can go the 8 bolts. They're not actually equal spaced, you can see, so the flywheel can only go on one way. Then it's, I have to put some thread lock on, then it's a torque, then it's a 30-degree angle and a 15-degree angle, and mark them all up when they're all done. So they're not stretch bolts, otherwise the torque, the angles would be much bigger, 90 degrees or something like that. Then they're reusable bolts, which is nice. On goes the clutch and the pressure plate, and then you can do actually a better alignment job than a clutch alignment tool by eye. So I've never actually owned a clutch alignment tool. You just put the bolts in, nip them up, like very lightly nip them up, so the clutch is held in place, but it's still free to move. If you stick a screwdriver in through the fingers there, you can maneuver the clutch around, lever it around, and then you just look down the hole. You've got the spigot in the middle, the splines where the clutch, where the input shaft goes, and then the fingers on the outside. You've got 3 circles to make concentric, and actually doing it that way, you can do it really accurately. So it just takes a tiny bit of fettling around, and it's done. And you can see as I tighten those down, the fingers, actually it's already happened, I think the fingers go forward as you tighten the pressure plate down. And on goes the gearbox. I changed the oil in the gearbox. I don't think there was much point because it was pretty clean actually, but fresh gearbox oil and on it goes. This took about 20 minutes actually to get to this point, just a bit of fiddling around. I think it was the lefty-righty rotation of the gearbox wasn't quite aligned to get the bolts through, but eventually got those bolts in and then tightened it home, as you can see now. This was quite a satisfying job and a lot easier than taking the whole engine out. So I'm quite pleased I did do it this way. Next I put the gear linkage and the gear stick in, as there's plenty of access to do so. Then I'll do the prop shaft and then the gearbox mount, because obviously the prop shaft is so hard to get off when the gearbox mount is still in place. Right, prop shaft's next. The Vauxhall Omega gearbox has these three chunky monkeys at quite a diameter from the centre, so they're fine. I've just got to tighten those bad boys up. The back though, this is pretty standard. The Scimitar, Jaguars, Land Rovers, they're all about the same, like a 9/16 bolt on each end. But my mate Tom has told me to get these aviation jobbies. You can see from the dimple there, aviation. They've got a much higher shear strength, yield strength, tensile strength. Sorry, they're fantastic. Every time I've taken standard prop shaft bolts off, I've seen the effects of shear. These I've used now and there's no marks for shear on them at all. The other cool thing is they've got a 12-star nut, which is a 7/16. So there is enough room to get the full ring spanner on it, making connection with every single mark inside that spanner, so it's a really decent connection, and it just about fits in the flange on the axle, whereas the 9/16 I cannot get the full ring spanner end on, so I've got to use that, and it really is a compromise rounding the nut off, you know. And then this end, which is super strong aviation stuff, I can just get the 14 on, which is a really nice tight fit on the 9/16 bolt. So this is a fantastic solution. It's also reusable, there's no damage to these at all. So yeah, and when the 1,000 Newton meters plus goes through that prop shaft in first gear, these bad boys keep me sleeping sound at night. Let's get that on now. So the prop goes in from the back onto the gearbox. There's a little nugget sticking out the back of the gearbox, and then onto the axle. I put those 4 bolts in loosely, and then tighten them down with the 14mm and the 7/16 spanner. You can get a hell of a torque on them this way. It's a really solid joint. I'm very happy with it. The gearbox end has these bolts with pinched nuts. They're quite hard to tighten down, like a nylock on steroids. But with the gearbox mount not there, it's much easier to do it. So that's all a relatively simple job now. Alright, I've got the bleed nipple there with a line on it. A bottle wedged under the exhaust pipe. Perfect. The reservoir is full, and I'm going to do a bit of pumping and keeping that full. So down goes the clutch fluid as I pump the pedal down and up, and all the bubbles come out the bottom end. And then it's on with the gearbox mount. It's actually being held up by the exhaust at the moment, which is nice. New rubber gearbox mount, which mounts to the bracket which I've welded onto the Scimitar cross member. Tighten all those bolts down. The Scimitar is done. It has its brand new clutch in it. It's got a lighter clutch pedal feel, but like 500 more clamping kilograms, which is amazing. So now it's the time-consuming process of getting it off the ramp. Interesting. Which, of course, is not that time-consuming when you're seeing it like 8 times sped up. I'm impressed with these ramps. It seems a shame to mess them up for the rolling road, really. When I pumped the clutch, I could tell the pedal was lighter, and that's when I emailed Rob, and he emailed back with that reply you've seen. I was very concerned the clutch was not stronger. As I backed the car out, I could feel it had more bite, but the pedal's easier to use. This car's actually going to be easier to drive now for long periods or in traffic, in terms of your leg getting achy anyway. So it feels fantastic. I've now got to do 250 normal miles without doing anything naughty. And then I should have the full performance of that clutch. It's been a real pleasure working on my hobby car again. Of course, the reason for all this work is to get it ready for commissioning, calibrating and getting to know the rolling road. So some exciting stuff to come with the Scimitar and the rolling road. Thanks for watching, folks.